Right. In that case, let us get started. So Colin, thank you very much for coming and telling us about what you do and how you generally keep on top of your skills. Could you please introduce yourself for the students to what you do and what your specialist field of expertise is?
Sure. So I'm Colin LeSueur. I run a company called By Odin's Beard RPG. It's a tabletop role-playing game publisher. So I make TTRPG systems and adventures and modules. So for something like Dungeons and Dragons, I've published a few adventures, and I do other OSR, like old school revival type systems, like Cairn. I've adapted Cairn into a game called Rune Cairn, and I publish digitally and in print, and I run my own shop, and my books are carried in different shops around the UK, in North America, and Australia as well.
Fantastic. So can I ask, is what you do mostly English language then? Does any of your work actually get translated into languages? I know that tabletop role play games are very English dominated, but is there any localization for your work?
Yeah, so I've been working with a Brazilian publisher to translate some of my work into Brazilian Portuguese. So that's underway now. There should be out in Brazil and Portugal by the end of the year. I'm talking with other publishers in Spain as well to get them translated into Spanish. But at the moment, just published in English, but there are, you know, other languages in the works.
Well, that's excellent. And the reason why I'm asking that before we were going to get into any proper questions, I guess, is because it reminded me just how globally I think a lot of our students will be thinking, because some of our students are in the UK, most of them are, but not all of them, crucially, thanks to travel restrictions. So we do have some students who'll be attending this remotely from all over the world, and of course, because of that, our students, when they graduate, and that's going to be quite soon, will be looking all over the world for jobs, and I guess at least looking for markets that aren't necessarily just UK markets. So it's really great that the tabletop role playing market is also a global one, and that's something that they might be able to access. So as a publisher, Colin, do you publish mostly your own work? You publish works created by others, or is this a vehicle for you and your creativity more than anything?
Yeah, primarily it's my own work. So I write, illustrate, edit, do the layout for all of my books. Some of them, my Rune Cairn, which is the adaptation of or the hack of Cairn, I have some public domain art in there, but other than that, everything's kind of my own work. Yeah, I haven't really looked into publishing other people's work, but I'm looking at having different collaborators in upcoming work. So, like commissioning a cover artist, for instance, stuff like that.
Right. So that's interesting, I think, to me and to many of our game designer students, because it is that there's not a huge amount of space left for the auteur game designer, a designer to work sort of purely on their own stuff. And I know that some of our students have got real passionate ideas about big projects that they want to do, whether it's in tabletop or whether it's in video games. I think the Venn diagrams do overlap hugely. Do you feel that tabletop, just sort of I'm going off brief already. But it's just really interesting to me, this concept of the auteur, the author who writes and publishes his own stuff. Is that something that you set out to do, or is it just something that sort of you've found a way that this is the best way for you to do the creativity that you want as you've kind of gone along? What was your plan?
So I originally started making my own stuff just for myself. Like I started out as a dungeon master running D&D for my friends. But then uh, I wanted to kind of publish my own things and turn a hobby into a bit of a side job as well. Um, so from the nature of that, it was all my work. Um, so it just kind of naturally led into that. And part of the like, I used to be more like when I was younger, I used to draw and paint a lot, and I fell out of that for a long time. So this was a way to get me back into making art, and so it's just a natural fit to make to illustrate my own things and to write my own stuff as well.
So that makes you one of those really annoying people who's good at everything then. Of which, there are some, and there are some on our courses as well, although they're my students and therefore are not annoying. But so being an all-rounder then, is that how you would describe yourself then, as this creator of tabletop role-play games, that because you do your own artwork and you do your own layouts and you write your own narratives and you work. I mean, I know that you've worked with existing systems like D&D and Cairn. But you'll have your own systems as well. Do you do the maths behind it too, I guess, is what I meant.
Not well, sort of. Like a lot of the heavy lifting's been done already. Because I use a D20 system for most everything I do. So that's what powers D&D from like third edition and on. And it's a fairly universal within TTRPG. It's a well-known system and it's well tested. So I'm not kind of reinventing the wheel when it comes to the maths of dice rolling. But I also change things up and like Cairn is a fork or is like a hack of earlier games like Into the Odd and Knave, and so each version is like an iteration of the previous game. So Rune Cairn, for instance, is an iteration of Cairn. So there's slight changes in it to the dice mechanics and stuff like that. But yeah, so I think when it comes to like illustration, writing, and layout, I think writing is where I'm most comfortable. Layout is what I'm fairly new to, and illustration, I'm still a bit rusty after not having done it for 20 years.
And that's the thing, isn't it, about skills that never go away, and that skills that like you say, get a bit rusty, and skills sort of at the front when you talk about them. Last week we should have had a lecture about T-shaped people, which I'm actually going to be doing this week on account of having been full of the lurgy last week. But it sounds to me like that you have your T-shape, which includes that kind of breadth of layout, although that's new to you, and illustration, and that sort of old but still kind of that is the breadth, and then but the depth for you is absolutely in the writing and scenario design. So that times quite nicely with the kind of stuff that our students are doing in this module, which is to look at what they want to do when they graduate, find that they have a portfolio that is very much the top of the T-shape, and they are trying to find their depth, that bit that they can really kind of show the depth and understanding of having a kind of a wheelhouse. This is my wheelhouse. This is what I'm doing, kind of thing. So as for where you got where you are today, what's your background then, Colin? How did you become this games publisher, and what do you think, skills wise or opportunities wise, were kind of key in you getting where you are today?
So it's a bit of an odd mix. So my academic background is in film studies, so film theory and analysis. But my career background is in IT and cybersecurity and business continuity. So there's not a lot of crossover between those two streams. But a lot of when I was in business continuity, a lot of my D&D and tabletop experience was really useful in planning out exercise scenarios and that sort of thing, and vice versa. So after, like, I took my experience in business continuity and then applied that into tabletop design. So there's a bit of crossover, but not really. I think in a lot of the IT skills, um, I think having a good knowledge of Excel and spreadsheets is really valuable. Just because there's, like you said, there's a lot of maths in it. There's a lot of tables and helps with layout as well. And just from the business side of it, because I run all the business myself too, so it's keeping track of budgets and um, schedules and that sort of thing. So it's Excel is a really useful skill to have.
That's really, see, that warms my heart, because I'm a fan of the spreadsheet as well. Having worked as a manager for a long time, and also working in games, there's nothing like an asset list that warms my heart.
Mhm.
And tracking times and budgets and things. In terms of when you got taught these skills, did you, because it seems to me, and I guess what I'm trying to fish for here is
Mhm.
what the difference is between the kind of what I call the hard skills of, actually, being able to do the math, or the soft skills of just, for want of a better phrase, getting your shit together and keeping on top of the sort of managing data and managing information, spreadsheets and things like that.
Mhm.
Did you get taught any of these so-called softish skills in your business continuity kind of career, or because I'm assuming that you didn't really get taught spreadsheet film studies, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So um, my IT skills are generally self-taught as well, because it's been a kind of a parallel track throughout my life. The creative side, the drawing and painting, but then also the computers and IT. So a lot of the Excel skills I've just taught myself. Um, but yeah, I think the the soft skills are kind of, I've picked up just by osmosis, really, like working in a corporate environment. So I've worked in IT for over 10 years now. So it's just things that I pick up but weren't necessarily spelled out or trained explicitly to me.
And that's really interesting, isn't it, about that corporate environment? Because I know that some of our students will be thinking about starting up their own businesses, or becoming individual developing publishing houses, development houses, very much like you're doing as well. And I'm just wondering how crucial you felt that corporate environment learning was before kind of branching out on your own. Do you think you could have done that without it? Or, I mean, yeah.
I think it definitely gave me a like a leg up on it, um, because because I know how to, like, I have experience operating in a professional environment or a corporate like environment. So I think that helps with the business side of it. Um, it smooths off a lot of the edges, and I know how to format an email, and how to tailor my communications, that sort of thing. So it does help smooth things along, especially when dealing with other small to medium companies like that I'm engaging with, and when I'm trying to sell my books and putting myself across in a professional way. So I think that definitely helps. Like it has helped me. It's given me a bit of an advantage in that way versus some people who don't have that corporate experience. I think it's just the nature of how companies operate these days.
Yeah, it's a business thing, isn't it?
Hmm.
I think you
That's
made
right.
some absolutely fantastic points there about this, about the just the kind of absorbing skills and information by osmosis in a corporate environment. Because I mean, no matter how creative and innovative your own business is, it's still a business, isn't it? And
Hmm.
those the skills, um, I think, are an interesting one that a lot of our students will be concerned about. How much did you have to learn the hard way when it came to the kind of running your own business, and what did the hard way look like for you?
So a lot of it was done the hard way. So thankfully, the barrier to entry is it's pretty low these days, especially in the UK. Um, so a lot of stuff I had to figure out myself, like how to sell things, what kind of taxes I should charge. Should I charge VAT? Am I allowed to start selling stuff? Like, do I need a license to have a business? Does it need to be registered? That kind of thing. So a lot of this I figured out myself, especially when it comes to like the publishing or printing side of it. There's some information out there, but a lot of it is kind of just trial and error. Yeah.
So what would you say the most essential skills are then for someone who's looking to um, maybe start publishing themselves, or whether this is, I guess, tabletop or whatever, or just sort of generally start their own business, their own creative enterprise? What kind of skills do you think that they really need to bring to the table? And don't say all of them, because it's just
I think the ability to research and find out information, and to find your own answers is really crucial. Because most of the information is out there. You just have to sift through it and find out what's relevant to you. So I think students would definitely have an advantage in that regard, especially if they've written any research papers, that sort of thing, and essays. Having that knowledge is very useful. Just being able to find out what you need and having a strong sense of like being able to maneuver on the internet and navigate the internet, which is is pretty commonplace nowadays. But when I was growing up, it wasn't that easy. But yeah, I think just being able to research and find out your own answers and then validate those and making sure that is what I do. A lot of what I do is research and then check and double check that things are correct.
and that does sound like it's very time consuming when it comes to the fact that really what you want to be doing when you're doing your business is actually doing the creative part, and then I guess the administrative part as well. And then if
Mhm.
you've also got the sales and marketing aspect to do as well. For of those kind of three areas, which one do you think takes up more time than you anticipated when you started out?
I think it's a mix, it's a balance between the marketing and the administration side. Yeah, I'd absolutely love to just spend all of my time creating and actually doing the doing and making things. But um, marketing and navigating social media has been a bit of a wake up call too, because it's changing all the time, and knowing what to do and what not to do is really important. And then the business side is there's a lot of just little fiddly things like administration that I need to keep track of, like updating my accounts and seeing when if people want to order more books if they're running low on supply. That's down to me to keep track of for the most part. Um, and then just maintenance of websites and things like that. So there's a lot of like little bitty things to keep track of.
And that does sound like something that is not something that you could just kind of do once a day either, especially not with the social media stuff. That could be quite a huge time sink.
Mhm.
How do you manage your time generally? Do you have like a set structure, or are you one of these people who just operates by feel and you can kind of sense when some of those plates that you're spinning are starting to slow down, or how do you regiment your time as a creative and as a person?
It's a bit of just play it by ear at the moment. It's what do I think needs to be done now? Take care of that, and yeah, it is a lot of plate spinning, and it's something that I'd like to get better at and have a bit more structure, because I don't want to spend my whole time doing my day job and my side job, because I have a wife. I want to have some free time and just to enjoy life.
Yeah, and I guess is there like a plan then for you to kind of segue from the 9 to 5 into making this a full-time business for yourself? I mean, do you have a structured plan for that? Is it something that you're having to like you say, play by ear, because obviously times are really not very certain right now.
Yeah.
Or do you actually, are you one of these people who has a quote 5-year plan, etc., and a short, a medium, and a long-term plan kind of thing?
I think it's I've got an aspirational plan, but whether or not it'll actually take shape, um, uh, I think I'm being realistic in my planning, and I know that that the tabletop industry is fairly fluent or like fluid and in flux, especially nowadays. So having a stable day job is important. But yeah, it's at the moment it's very much see how things go, and because I'm still fairly early in the development of my side job.
And yet, you were already an established publisher, and you've been working with some very very big names and some lesser known names. So you are definitely out there, and you're doing in these uncertain times, which is, I guess, for 2021, that's pretty good. But yeah, I suppose what I'm trying to get towards, just trying to kind of dig into that a little bit, in that everything that you do is aspirational. But I know that some of our students, in fact, many of our students, and I think young people in general, are very concerned about the future, because what has happened in the past isn't necessarily what we cannot rely on past events to predict future events anymore. And there is sort of global uncertainty in lots of different areas, and I'm just wondering how you kind of deal with that uncertainty as a creative, as a business person. Does that sort of impact your thinking? Do you find that you're spending more time looking at what the sector's doing, or do you find that you have to network a lot more to kind of keep on top of things, or do you just kind of carry on and hope for the best? I'm just wondering what your personal strategy is for managing that uncertainty.
So I'm always looking to have a gradual expansion. So not to run before I could walk, essentially. And I'm always looking at establishing new contacts and connections, and um, so yeah, I think I don't pay a lot of attention to what the greater industry is doing, just in the fact that I look to see what successful people have done in the past, and try and take from that, like learn from that, especially when it comes to like Kickstarters and crowdfunding or like marketing.
So it sounds to me, just trying to kind of interpret what you're saying for some of my students' ears, that the sector will always be the sector, whether it's like you say, where it's a very fluid one like tabletop role play games. So that will kind of take itself. But for you, it's more about managing your own risks and what risks you take in your business decisions, and also so that you've got a good community network that will keep you informed on a more local level. Is that a fair way of summarizing it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really good UK tabletop community. Um, I like any other niche community. There's their own, you've got your own um, uh, unofficial rules and insiders and outsiders and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think it's a vibrant community, and it's been really helpful, and providing both support, knowledge, and reinforcement and that sort of thing.
So you've talked a lot about community, the community of tabletop role-playing creators, I guess, and publishers in particular. How would you, if say, for example, some of our students were thinking about joining that community, maybe they've got their own IP that they're already developing, or they're very keen to develop for existing IP. I know that we have a lot of D&D players in the room. How much did the kind of networking with the community help you get towards the IP, particularly for Cairn? Did you sort of network your way into that particular circle, or was it just kind of there as generally part of the stuff that you did as a player?
Well, Cairn's an interesting one because there was a an SRD system reference document released for Cairn. So essentially, that means that the rules are available online for free, and it was released with a Creative Commons license, so a share alike license. So that means that anyone can take the content and use it for their own means and modify it, edit it, republish it, even sell it. So that's what I did with Rune Cairn. I took the basis of Cairn and remodified it, remixed it, and released it as Rune Cairn. And I released my own SRD uh, in the end as well. So that's what having uh, that SRD, that kind of weigh in to the community was really useful because the creator of Cairn, I started connecting with him, and I'm now in the Discord, one of his Discords. Um, so having that connection is really useful because he helped to broadcast and share my work as well, and develop the community. So Rune Cairn became a part of the Cairn community, and now Rune Cairn has its own um, community, which is still early, but it's developing.
That's fantastic, though. I love that you mentioned Creative Commons there, because I don't know if that's anything that our students are aware of, and bring that in for students where I talk in detail about Creative Commons licenses and how you can and can't use them, both as a creator and as somebody who is essentially a consumer or a fan creator, if you like. And it's really great to hear you as a publisher talk about Creative Commons in particular, and sharing some, making some of your own work open access,
Mhm.
fully free access, but say under a Creative Commons license. When it comes to things like intellectual property and trying to strike that balance between being a good team player in the community and
Mhm.
safeguarding your own creations. How do you feel about copyright, and what's your personal kind of philosophy on intellectual property? And I've completely off script, and I'm really sorry, but it's just really.
That's all right. It's an interesting question, and it's something that that's been a like a question in tabletop role playing since it started. Um, because there's the concept of homebrew, where it's like taking the rules that are published in official books like D&D, for instance, and changing them and editing them for your own home games, your own personal games. So there's always been a homebrew scene, um, but then how do you balance that with having the copyright of the specific things like D&D, Wizards of the Coast has they've released an OGL, so an open gaming license for D&D. They did this back in third edition, so 2008, I think, 2000 or the mid 2000s. They released an OGL, so that means that anyone could use a good majority of the rules in the officially published books. So that's where the scene kind of exploded, the homebrew scene. Um, third party publishers started writing and producing their own material for Dungeons and Dragons, and that's carried on throughout to the fifth edition, which is the most recent edition of D&D. So when the first books that I released were um, 5e compatible, so they were written with the open gaming license. Um, so I had to navigate what you could include in that and what you needed to leave out because it was still under copyright. Um, but it's definitely a there's always been piracy in tabletop gaming, like whether it's just photocopying a rule book, or character sheets. I used to go into my dad's work and photocopy dozens of D&D character sheets just so I have them because I didn't have the originals. Um, so there's always that tension between the copyright, homebrew, piracy, access to the data and access to the information. So there's always going to be that tension.
As a creative, though, how much do you worry about piracy of your content?
So it's not really something that I can worry about too much, or that I let myself worry about too much, because my books they've been released on piracy websites, like pirate websites. Just happens, like anytime there's a PDF out there, someone will upload it to different pirate sites. So it's not something. Yeah, so it's good that my content's out there for people to have access to, but it would be nice if they paid me for it, essentially. Um, but as an independent creator, I've got a different perspective now. So
Yeah,
it's yeah.
understandable. And it must be really difficult, because there is an aspect, I think, particularly possibly uniquely in tabletop role playing, that, you know, if somebody does get to download a PDF for a game that they play,
Mhm.
and then they enjoy that game, then there is a much better chance that they'll actually end up buying the physical copy, or they'll get a proper PDF, or even if they don't buy the core rules, that they will then splash out on a new adventure when that comes out, or
Mhm.
that sort of smaller content. And I'm guessing it's kind of similar in video games as well, with the modding community. And if your game gets modded, then the
Mhm.
chances are that people will want to get the original game, etc., etc. But it's interesting to me that you don't worry too much about copyright theft as a creative, although that you'd like to be paid for it. It's not something that you're not out there sort of throwing lawsuits around, or at least not
Yeah.
yet. We'll wait until your first million, then you have as many lawsuits as you like. But it's just really interesting to me, because I know that our students are really very concerned, and I wonder if it's a generational thing, about people stealing their intellectual property, and or making use of it in ways that they can't control. And it's interesting to me that this is something that you don't commit yourself a lot of time to worry about.
Yeah.
And I guess that's a generational thing or not.
Yeah, I think it's just like, as soon as you start putting art or content up on the internet, like it's going to be, um, people are going to use it for whatever they want to use it for, essentially. And you can guard against that as much as you can, but it's like fighting against the tide, essentially. So for a lot of my PDFs, I offer community copies as well. So if anyone's marginalized or in need, they can get a copy of my PDFs for free. So that helps. That helps. I think that helps stave off piracy a little bit, or at least in my own mind, it's like, well, you won't need to download it from a pirate website if you can get it directly from me for free.
Yeah, and I guess that is taking back some control, if not necessarily financial control, at least
Mhm.
some control, rather than the pirates having all the control. Have you done much? I mean, because this nicely bringing us into things like humble bundles, and
Mhm.
which then I guess going to bring us on to things like Kickstarter as well. How much have you done much with humble bundles yourself? Is your content in with others, or are you mostly Kickstarter funded?
So I've done quite a few, maybe half a dozen or a dozen bundles over the years, over the last 2 years. So most of them are charity bundles. Like there was the Australian wildfire. There was a charity bundle for that on Drive-Thru RPG, and so I put some of my books in that. There's a excuse me. There's a bundle on right now, actually, on itch.io for Dragon Meet, to allow people to attend Dragon Meet who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it. So I think it's over $1,200 now that's been raised for that. So I've got two books in that bundle. So I think it is important. It's important to help support those who need support. But selfishly, it also gets my work out there, and it benefits me. And giving away PDFs is there's no cost to it, absolutely. So there's no downside, really. So it helps people out, and it helps me get my name out there a bit more.
That's excellent. Yeah, and I guess having that, it's part of that community aspect as well, isn't it? To give back to the community as a whole, as kind of a good human, but also to stake your claim as being part of that tabletop community and have your name there with other names, and to use that for marketing reasons as well. I think that's a nice balance. And to ask you about, how you've mentioned that you have to be a real self-starter and that this is all pretty much kind of self-directed. As a professional human, what would you say is the best way of making sure that you can develop your skill set as a self-starter? What do you need to do? Is there something that you schedule time for? Do you have a list of things that you want to develop, or are you are you very reactive in what comes through to you as your business right now, and you need to react to that and to develop what you need kind of right now? Where do you think your balance lies?
Yeah, definitely the latter. So essentially, if I need to do something, or if I need to figure out how to do something, I'll learn it there and then, and learn that skill. So it can lead me down a rabbit hole of like I published a new website just the other day, so I had to learn, I had to teach myself a new platform on where to publish it, and a new operating system for the website, or what it's built with, that sort of thing. So it can cause delays. It can lead me down a different route. So, but I think that's the way I work best. If I need to know how to do something, I'll just learn how to do it, and then teach myself how to do it, rather than planning out and looking at what I might need to know, because I don't really know. It's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because in this module I talk a lot about the kind of I use the Donald Rumsfeld's known unknowns and unknown unknowns, and I think that the longer you spend in a sector and the more you spend in a community, the more you will have known unknowns, things that you don't know, and you can then also make decisions on whether you need to know them or not. Do I need to know them now? Will I need to know them in 5 years? That kind of thing. It's about when you're new to the community and you're new to the sector, and then everything is an unknown. You have no idea the things that you should know about but don't know about yet, or that you may need to understand. But it's great to hear that you have that approach of, I need, oh look, this is something that I'm going to need to know. I'd better go learn that now, or it will. The need will present itself, and you will respond to that need, and you will react to that particular need. Do you think that's a tabletop thing in particular, or do you think that may be common to all businesses?
I think it's common to all businesses, or it can be, especially if you're a small business owner in the UK. There's so much out there. Like, there's so many unknowns, that every day every day you're learning something new, and every day you're looking into something new. I think the good thing about the tabletop community is that you're not the first person to go through this. You're not the first person to try and do what you're doing. So you can see a lot of shared knowledge in the past, and where people have struggled, and best practice, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of best practice available out there in blogs and on Twitter and that sort of thing.
Oh, that's great to know. Yeah, especially Twitter, seeing as Twitter is something that my generation is very much all. Because I consider myself to be one of the grognard crew, so kind of I've sort of been around for long enough for Twitter to be a thing, and of course many of my students are younger, and therefore will perhaps not be so Twitter active. But as I've been trying to explain to them, is that a lot of people who've been around in the industry for a long time, and who are either movers or shakers, or, like you say, have good practice, are on Twitter, and that's why it's good to go on Twitter. Not because it's your generation's, but because it is the previous generation's kind of platform, and it's good to be on that. The pandemic or Brexit changed you and your experience as a small business owner. How has it affected you? And just how has that affected how you work? And do you think it's going to continue to affect it for a while?
Yeah, so Brexit in particular was kind of it was a bombshell for the tabletop industry. I I came in, like, I started selling stuff just as Brexit was coming into force, coming into play. So I didn't know what it was like before Brexit, or I didn't have that much of an idea. I was selling mainly locally in the UK, and Brexit just basically decimated sales to and from the EU, just because it's a logistical nightmare now to sell stuff to the EU. So that's been a huge influence, and I think we'll be seeing the repercussions for years and years in tabletop. Um, so I've so when it comes to pandemic, that's also been a major disruption, just because of mainly shipping and delays and shortages, like pulp and paper shortages is really hitting the TTRPG industry. Um, and because a lot of the medium and larger companies rely on shipments from China, and those are being disrupted. So there's not as much international trade going on now as there could be. So that's I've started, rather than printing stuff locally and shipping it over to North America or to Australia, I do local print runs now. So I have stuff printed in Canada or in the US, and I've got another TTRPG publisher that handles my distribution for certain things in Canada and North America. So that's you're having to get a bit more creative and how to get things to places and how to get your stuff to people.
That's really interesting. This idea that you can't print locally. Of course, that's going to have a knock-on effect on the UK print industry, because they're not doing those runs for external shipping, and the rest of the world is benefiting when our economy is not.
Hmm.
Do you think that, as this is likely to be a medium to long term disruption, that things like the PDF and the digital downloads are becoming more important, and therefore, again, something to worry about more in terms of that piracy and things?
Yeah, I think people have started pivoting to more PDF and digital sales. Um, and there's also solutions like print on demand. So DriveThru RPG, you can have a PDF. You can buy a PDF from DriveThru RPG, but you can also enroll it in the print on demand program. So rather than having warehouses full of books, they'll print it on demand essentially. So they'll farm it out to a printer, and then send that directly out to the customer. So I think we're gonna see a lot more of that happening. And also, itch.io has become more of a mover in TTRPG scenes. I think DriveThru RPG and Itch are the two big sites for buying and selling PDFs, for at least tabletop role playing PDFs. So I think we'll see more of that, and less emphasis on printing, and I think print runs will become more bespoke and more deluxe, for instance.
Yes, as we are seeing with those wonderful Dune books at the moment,
Hmm.
which I've been salivating over and then crying over the price of. So
Yeah.
yeah, interesting, isn't it? How that's becoming a sort of a two-tier system, where you have the sort of the PDF for, especially for online play, and for those who just sort of want to have an entry level to that content, and then you have the deluxe edition for the collector.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's interesting how tabletop role playing is particularly cashing in on that at the moment. I mean, it used to just be, here, have even shinier dice, and now people have got dice made out of obsidian and various other excitement. Then we're now going to have the equivalent of obsidian roleplay books.
Hmm.
But that's really interesting that things like global shipping disruption and material disruption is going to have this additional effect on not just on sales, but also the whole structure of the sector. I think is really interesting. Before we go on to student questions, which are coming in a minute, I just want to sort of end the formal structured part of the interview by asking you what the one thing is that you wish you had known when you'd started out. So you know, taking this from a sort of player creator into something more professional and more corporate, what was that one thing that you wish someone had told you before you'd started?
I think the simple answer is that you can do it. Like that that it's set up now so that anyone can start making their own games and publishing them and selling them. Not just TTRPG games, but video games as well. Like itch is great for that. So it's yeah, the barrier to entry is so low these days. I wish I'd known it a bit earlier, and I would have started making stuff earlier because everything's there. Like all you need to know is out there. You just need to know how to find it and how to find out what you need to know. So I think the short answer is the um, how I won't say how easy it is, but how frictionless it can be to start just selling, like making your own stuff and selling it, and becoming a tabletop designer.
Fantastic. Well, that's the end of my my official questioning. Thank you very much for being so patient with my rambling off script. And students will be like, "Yeah, that's no surprise. Kate does that all the time." So I'm really sorry about that. But is there anything that I haven't asked you, or that you haven't had a chance to talk about, that you think actually I really like the students to know this? You've missed.
I think you mentioned Kickstarter, and I mentioned it as well, and I think that's a big part of tabletop, like the tabletop realities these days, um, because Kickstarter is a viable way um, to get your content, to get your books out there, basically. It's primarily a marketing tool, just because, especially around Zine Quest, which happens every February, March. There's a lot of emphasis on tabletop role playing games, and Kickstarter can be a big black hole of information and stress, but it is really useful if you want to get your name out there and to actually get stuff made. If you're looking to to grow your business, to get more people interested in it, and to actually get it out there and printed. Kickstarter's a great way to do it, but there's a lot of pitfalls, and you just have um, to be aware of the potential downsides of Kickstarter. But it is an important part of TTRPG.
With Kickstarter in particular, and I guess with crowdfunding in general, there is, I think, a concern, or people are sort of generally thinking, yes, it's great, but I'm a complete noob. I don't have a reputation. How can I get somebody to engage with my Kickstarter if I don't already have that reputation to fall back on?
Mhm.
So if you're going to bring out, you know, episode 2, or you know, whatever, you've already got that established kind of those credentials. Have you got any advice for anybody who's looking to get to Kickstarter or to any other crowdfunding, for getting off that, just taking that first step?
I think I think Zine Quest is a good first step because it's relatively low stakes. You can release anything, like it can be 10 to 12 pages, it can be anything like that. It can be PDF only, doesn't have to be print. There's a lot of information out there on how to run a Zine Quest, so it's a good point of entry. But it's always going to be a struggle to get people interested in what you're doing, and walking that fine line between promotion and marketing and kind of just spamming or saturating everything. And you don't want to be the person who just spams your own work. So it's a fine line, and it's a kind of a delicate balance.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned the kind of marketing aspect, because you mentioned earlier that you do you do some of your own illustrations, and that you sometimes get some rights free artwork.
Mhm.
Do you find that artwork makes a big difference for things like TTRPGs, in terms of marketing and sales?
It can do. I think layout is is coming up there to be as important as art. Um, there's always going to be the conflict or the tension between polished uh, productions, good art, good layout, and also then the scrappy zine aesthetic, or the more like anti-aesthetic, like Mork Borg, or like yeah, stuff like that. So there's always going to be a balance there. Um, I think yeah, I think there's always going to be people are always going to pay more attention to something that has good art and good layout, but it doesn't that's not the end all and be all in tabletop.
No, it needs to have that substance, doesn't it? But it's about also about sort of grabbing the attention. And I say that because, you know, there are some of the people in this room will be a game artist, most of them 3D, but also, you know, many of them 2D. Of course, the idea of 3D 2D artist is getting much more blurred than it ever used to be. Our concept artists are doing 3D work, and our 3D artists are doing 2D work too. So yeah, I guess what I was fishing for was that artists can have a place in this, particularly as when it comes to things like Kickstarters, and whether you're doing a zine quest, to just kind of grab attention, or at least to put yourself into a particular market and to align yourself with a particular market of existing IP, and also to show how you might have unique selling points as well. So has anybody got any questions that they wanted to ask Colin about anything that we've already covered, or something that's completely personal to you, or anything else to do with the talk that we've had or the module? This is where we get acres of silence while people are either typing furiously or going, there's no way I'm going to paste in a question. This is fine. Well, look, I have to say, we'll give it another 30 seconds or so, Colin, but it does look like that you've covered everything that everybody wanted to ask. So I can only conclude that you are awesome, and that everybody has got all the information that they needed. Just wanted to say thank you again for your time. Much appreciated, especially seeing as you are, you know, juggling, should I say, the day job and the publishing business and the creative stuff. But I'm hoping that if we do get any, he is awesome, is what it says. Brilliant. Oh, here's a question. Here's a question that's come in, other than saying that you are awesome. Do you self-review your work, or do you get your friends in the industry to look over it? Oh, that's a good one. Thank you, Rhys.
So it's a bit of a mix. When it comes to like reviewing or editing my own work, I do some play tests. So Rune Cairn, I play tested with a friend of mine. He's someone that I've played D&D with, and Rune Cairn is heavily inspired by Dark Souls, and he's a big Dark Souls fan. So I wanted his impression of it. So I ran through it with him, and I do some other play testing. I also send the documents out to my friends for review as well. Not so much these days, because I think now that I'm a bit more confident in it. I mean, you can never replace like a good editor, but to get a good editor, it costs a good amount of money. So I tend to just edit my own work. But yeah, I mean, I would ask like for peer review from like Cairn, for instance. Yohai, who created Cairn, I sense check some stuff with him and send it to him to see if that makes sense, if that fits within the spirit of it and that sort of thing.
Fantastic. So there is a kind of a balance to be struck then between that kind of reciprocal play testing and but not going all the way out into asking someone to edit your work and you're not editing someone else's work. So again, a very kind of delicate balance of mutual back scratching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think we're pretty much at time, and you know, other people have things to do, and there are other classes that will go ahead. So I'll draw this to a close. But thank you very much, Colin, for your. Oh no, there's another question that's come in. Would you say that the physical table for tabletop role playing is still a lucrative one?
I think it is, yeah. There's always going to be a space for physical copies of like physical books, um, and especially like on Kickstarter, for instance, or with bespoke or like niche publishers like Exalted Funeral in the States. So there is going to be there's always going to be a place for physical releases. Stuff is going online more often, yeah, but I think there's always going to be people who want one physical copy of it.
And as you said before, the collector's copy and the sort of luxury editions are always going to be appealing.
Mhm.
Final question then, another one from Reese, which is, do you remember your first bit of homebrew, and what was it like?
Well, yeah, because I never really ran modules or adventures myself. I always just wrote them. So even back when I was doing D&D second edition in the 90s, I would just write my own adventures. So so when it comes to like writing my own stuff, but homebrew, yeah, I can't think of any specific rules that I would change in D&D. Uh, I came from second edition to third and 3.5 and Pathfinder, so that's I tend to play a bit more tactically, and have it be a bit crunchier, a bit more rolls and combat, have a bit more focus on combat and that sort of thing.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much again. I'm going to close it to questions now. If any further questions do come along, am I okay to forward them to you on Twitter, and maybe you can send out a couple of tweets with some of those questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you just remind us of your Twitter handle so that our students can follow you, Colin? I suppose find it on my Twitter, but I can't find it.
That's all right. Yeah, you can find me at Bio Odin's Beard RPG. So by Odin's Beard RPG. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, website, same by Odin's Beard RPG.com. Yeah, so just let me know if you have any questions.
That's great. Well, thank you very, very much. Much appreciated. And I'm sure that our students are very, very pleased to see you. We'd give you all a round of applause, but that'll just break the bandwidth. So just consider this a round of applause from everybody. And thank you very much for your time. And yeah, we'll be in touch. And if you wanted to share any more links to your stuff, quite happy to share them, because I think, you know, you've earned some free marketing from this, if nothing. But good luck with Runecairn, and the fact that you've mentioned that it's Dark Souls related, I think has just got you at least 50 more sales in this particular demographic. But thank you again, Colin. I'm going to stop the recording now, and then in a minute or so I will close the meeting, but you are free to leave. Thank you so much for talking to us today. It's much appreciated.
All right, thanks. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Kay.
Thank you very much.